proud of you.
I'm proud of you too. I'm
proud of you. I'm so proud of you guys. I know that sometimes it sounds like just a word when we talk about being resilient, but it's not, man. It's how we live.
Yep.
It's how y'all live, and it's a tribute to you. It's a tribute to your connectedness, your togetherness, your toughness, your mindset. You never give up gritty attitudes. Like, that's what it takes. That's what it takes, and we will never be counted out.
Yep.
Because that is worth gold. That is worth.
What I'm about to show you will completely change how you view Caitlin Clark's strategic mind and expose the most sophisticated MVP campaign orchestration in WNBA history. While everyone was focused on Sophie Cunningham's devastating injury, I've been following the digital breadcrumbs of something far more calculated happening behind the scenes. Here's what the mainstream coverage missed while they were drowning in injury conspiracy theories. The moment Kelsey Mitchell dropped 38 points in the most clutch performance of 2025, Caitlin Clark didn't just celebrate. She launched a precision strike social media campaign that's systematically engineering Mitchell's MVP narrative from the shadows. And I've got the receipts. Let's start with the smoking gun. Within minutes of Mitchell's historic performance, Clark posted exactly 2 words on social media: MVP Kels. Not a paragraph, not an emotional essay. 2 strategically chosen words that carried more viral weight than every sports analyst's take combined. But here's where it gets fascinating. The temperature of the online conversation shifted immediately. Clark's 1.2 million followers didn't just see a teammate supporting teammate. They witnessed the most influential player in women's basketball officially endorsing her replacement's MVP candidacy. The psychological impact was instant and devastating to every other MVP candidate. Now, let me paint you the full picture of what really happened that night, because the competitor videos you've seen are focusing on all the wrong details.
For 25 minutes, didn't look like we had any business beating this Connecticut Sun team. For 25 minutes, we looked like the worst team on the court. Defensive rotations, Marina hitting the three, Sanaya Rivers taking it to the rim, Tina Charles, Aaliyah Edwards, out-rebounding AB, Natasha Howard, but we came alive when we needed to come alive. We forced overtime. Kelsey Mitchell, back-to-back threes in OT. Lexi Hull, dagger 3, putting the nail in the coffin.
That 38-point explosion wasn't just individual brilliance, it was the final piece of evidence Clark needed to launch her MVP engineering project. See, I've been filtering through the noise of Clark's social media strategy for weeks, and the signals point to something much deeper than casual support. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the digital breadcrumbs, a different picture emerges. Clark has been systematically amplifying Mitchell's performances throughout her injury absence, creating a narrative foundation that positions Mitchell as not just a replacement, but as the rightful MVP heir. Think about the timing. Clark's MVP Kels tweet didn't happen randomly. It was deployed at peak viral moment, when Mitchell's performance had maximum emotional impact and social media engagement potential. That's not accident, that's strategic communication warfare. But the story doesn't end there, because what happened next validates everything I've been tracking about Clark's influence network. The teammate endorsement avalanche began immediately. Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hull, and the entire Fever roster started echoing Clark's MVP messaging. But here's what they missed. This wasn't organic teammate support. This was a coordinated campaign triggered by Clark's strategic signal. I've been connecting the dots on Clark's social media activity during her injury absence, and the pattern is undeniable. Every Mitchell highlight gets amplified. Every statistical achievement gets celebrated. Every clutch moment gets the Clark endorsement treatment. She's not just supporting her teammate, she's architecting her legacy. Reading the signals from the WNBA community response, something unprecedented is happening. When the most famous player in the league declares someone MVP-worthy, it creates psychological pressure on voters, media, and fans that traditional campaigning could never achieve.
Sophie's sister, I believe, and her mother both tweeted about this play. Now, Lindsay, her sister, said, WNBA, maybe you should focus less on fining players for commenting on your poor officiating and more about hiring officials that are able to call a consistent game and protect your athletes. Pathetic. Praying for you, Sophie. And then Paula, who I think is her her mom. That's what the internet is saying. She said Hartley is a disgruntled player, having trouble everywhere she goes. She's plain mean and plays out of on the ground. She was crying. She was yelling. It definitely seemed like she was in a ton of pain. The training staff went over to her. They went to commercial break. Like, it was a real injury. This wasn't something, and Sophie's the type of player, a lot of times when she does get injured, she just gets right back up. She tries to walk it off. This was something that kept her down, and it was so hard to see. It is ironic because Bria Hartley has been in multiple scuffles this year with the Connecticut Sun. A lot of people would categorize her as a dirty.
That brings us to the inevitable question nobody's asking. Why is Caitlin Clark investing this much strategic energy into Mitchell's MVP campaign instead of protecting her own future candidacy? Here's the angle nobody's covering. Clark understands something about influence and power that most athletes never figure out. By positioning herself as the kingmaker rather than just the king, she's creating a different kind of authority. She's not just the best player, she's the player who decides who else gets recognized. Okay, now let's get into insider territory. Nothing is officially confirmed, but the online chatter about Clark's strategic planning is too loud to ignore. Multiple sources within basketball analytics circles are suggesting that Clark's social media activity follows patterns consistent with professional campaign strategy. The numbers don't lie about the viral impact. Clark's two-word endorsement generated more engagement than most full interviews. Her follow-up tweets during Mitchell's performance created trending hashtags. The multiplier effect of her influence turned a great individual game into a cultural moment. But here's what the other channels won't tell you about the deeper psychological game Clark is playing. By championing Mitchell's MVP case while she's injured, Clark is accomplishing multiple strategic objectives simultaneously. She's maintaining relevance despite absence. She's building teammate loyalty that will pay dividends when she returns. She's positioning herself as a leader who elevates others, not just herself. The meta-narrative here is extraordinary. We're watching a 22-year-old manipulate the MVP conversation through pure social media influence while sitting on the sideline. That's not just basketball IQ, that's political sophistication at an elite level. Let me break down the viral mechanics that made this so effective, because the science behind Clark's approach reveals why it worked so perfectly. Authentic peer endorsements outperform traditional media MVP discussions by massive margins. When teammates endorse each other, audiences perceive it as insider knowledge rather than promotional content. Clark leveraged this psychological principle expertly. The timing optimization was surgical. Clark's endorsements hit during peak emotional moments, right after clutch performances, during comeback victories, at maximum engagement windows. Each tweet was a precision strike designed for maximum viral coefficient. What particularly fascinating is how Clark's absence actually amplified her influence. Instead of competing with Mitchell for attention, she became the authoritative voice validating Mitchell's excellence. That's psychological warfare mastery. The ripple effects extended far beyond social media. Basketball analysts started incorporating Clark's perspective into their MVP discussions. The entire narrative framework shifted because Clark altered the conversation dynamics. But here's where this connects to the larger story that everybody missed while focusing on injury drama. Mitchell's 38-point performance didn't just break franchise records, it positioned her in exclusive statistical territory with Diana Taurasi. According to the record books, Mitchell just joined Taurasi as the only players in WNBA history with multiple games of 35 or more points, 6 or more assists, and 5 or more three-pointers. That's the kind of historical context that creates lasting MVP arguments, and Clark knew exactly how to weaponize this information for maximum impact. The Diana Taurasi comparison is pure viral gold because it connects Mitchell to basketball royalty while establishing legitimate MVP credentials. Clark's endorsement gave this statistical achievement the platform it needed to penetrate mainstream consciousness. Reading the signals from basketball analytics communities, Mitchell's case is gaining serious momentum. The statistical arguments are becoming undeniable. The peer endorsements are creating social proof. The historical comparisons are providing legitimacy.
I couldn't believe it. I didn't know what it was at first when I saw her went down. So let's break down the play where Sophie got hurt. So as you can see here, Bria Hartley is going baseline. Kelsey Mitchell is guarding her, and then Sophie comes over to help. And then Bria Hartley falls on her leg, and Sophie immediately grabs like her shin area.
So what's fact and what's speculation? Let's break it down systematically. The facts are clear. Clark's social media activity demonstrably amplified Mitchell's MVP conversation. Her endorsements generated measurable viral engagement. The teammate support network activated immediately after Clark's signal. The speculation involves intent and coordination. Was this strategic campaign orchestration or organic teammate support? The patterns suggest sophisticated planning, but the direct evidence requires reading between the lines. What's undeniable is the effectiveness. Mitchell's MVP candidacy went from fringe conversation to serious consideration, largely because Clark legitimized it through her influence network. The competitive intelligence here reveals something profound about modern athlete influence. Traditional MVP campaigns rely on performance and media narratives. Clark created a third category, social media influence warfare, that shapes perception in real time. But the psychological brilliance goes even deeper than campaign tactics. By positioning herself as Mitchell's champion rather than competitor, Clark is building a different kind of legacy. She's not just the greatest player, she's the player who recognizes and elevates greatness in others. That's leadership authority that transcends statistics. The long-term implications are staggering. When Clark returns from injury, she'll have a teammate who owes her MVP consideration to Clark's strategic support. The loyalty and chemistry benefits could define championship runs. From a franchise perspective, Clark's actions demonstrate unprecedented team-first mentality while maintaining individual influence. She's proving that superstar leadership involves making teammates better, not just personal excellence. The broader context reveals Clark's understanding of influence economics. In today's social media landscape, the player who shapes narratives wields more power than players who just perform well. Clark is mastering both simultaneously. That brings us to the inevitable question about what this means for the actual MVP race moving forward. With Nafisa Collier injured and Aja Wilson as the primary competition, Mitchell's candidacy has legitimate mathematical pathways. Clark's endorsement network provides the social proof necessary to compete with established MVP narratives. The playoff positioning implications add urgency to Mitchell's case. Indiana sits at 19-16, 2.5 games ahead of ninth place, with just 9 games remaining. If Mitchell leads them to playoff security, the MVP argument becomes undeniable. Statistical momentum supports the campaign. Since the All-Star break, Mitchell's averaging 22.8 points, 4.3 assists, shooting 42.1% from the field, and 39.5% from three. Those are MVP-caliber numbers amplified by Clark's influence platform. The peer endorsement trend is accelerating beyond just teammates. Tamika Catchings, the Fever legend, tweeted, "Gonna need y'all to say her name when talking about MVP about Mitchell." Historical validation plus current star power creates unstoppable narrative momentum. But here's what makes Clark's strategy even more sophisticated than pure MVP campaigning. She's simultaneously protecting her own future interests while elevating Mitchell's present case. When Clark returns, she'll have a co-star with enhanced confidence and recognition rather than a supporting player with resentment issues. The psychological investment Clark made in Mitchell's success creates reciprocal loyalty that championship teams require. She's not just building Mitchell's MVP case, she's building long-term championship infrastructure. Official sources won't tell you this, but the temperature of the online conversation suggests that Clark's influence tactics are being studied and copied throughout the league. She's not just changing the MVP race, she's changing how elite athletes build influence networks. From a cultural perspective, Clark's approach demonstrates how modern superstars can maintain relevance during adversity. Instead of fading during injury absence, she became more influential by becoming the authoritative voice for excellence recognition. The viral mechanics reveal advanced understanding of audience psychology. Clark's content strategy targets the need for insider knowledge and exclusive perspectives. Her followers don't just want basketball highlights, they want access to basketball intelligence. Reading the signals from media coverage patterns, traditional sports journalism is struggling to keep pace with social media influence campaigns. Clark's two-word tweets generate more narrative momentum than comprehensive analytical pieces. That's why other channels missed this story completely. They're still operating in traditional media frameworks, while Clark is conducting psychological warfare through next-generation influence tactics. The competitive advantage Clark created through strategic absence is unprecedented in professional sports. She's not just the best player, she's the player who determines what excellence looks like, and who gets recognized for achieving it. So what's the real story behind Mitchell's MVP emergence? It's not just individual brilliance, though that's certainly present. It's the strategic amplification of that brilliance through the most sophisticated influence network in women's sports. Clark didn't just endorse Mitchell, she engineered her ascension through precision psychology and viral mechanics that competitors can't match because they don't understand the game being played. The meta-narrative here is extraordinary. We're witnessing the intersection of elite athletic performance and advanced social media strategy, creating MVP campaigns that transcend traditional basketball evaluation. Here's what I expect moving forward. Clark's influence tactics will become the template for how elite athletes build power and shape narratives. The days of purely performance-based recognition are ending. We're entering the era of strategic influence warfare. For Mitchell, the Clark endorsement network provides platform and legitimacy that individual excellence alone couldn't achieve. Her MVP case is now supported by the most powerful influence network in women's basketball. For the WNBA, Clark's approach demonstrates how star power can be leveraged to elevate teammates and create compelling narratives that drive engagement beyond just individual performance. The biggest revelation is that Clark understood something fundamental about modern athlete influence that most superstars miss. The player who shapes the conversation wields more power than the player who just dominates the conversation. By positioning herself as Mitchell's champion and validator, Clark created authority that extends beyond her own performance. She's not just the best player, she's the player whose opinion about basketball excellence carries the most weight. That's the kind of strategic thinking that separates generational talents from ordinary superstars. Clark isn't just playing basketball, she's playing the influence game at a level that reshapes how we understand athletic leadership. Looking ahead, expect this MVP campaign to intensify as playoff positioning becomes critical. Clark's endorsement network will continue amplifying Mitchell's performances while building the narrative infrastructure necessary for serious MVP consideration. The psychological impact on opponents cannot be understated. When the most famous player in the league declares your teammate MVP worthy, it creates mental pressure that affects on-court dynamics and competitive confidence. For fans seeking exclusive basketball intelligence, Clark's social media strategy provides a masterclass in influence economics and narrative engineering that extends far beyond sports into leadership and communication psychology. The temperature of the online conversation confirms that audiences are hungry for this level of meta-analysis. They want to understand not just what happened, but why it happened and how it was orchestrated. What we've uncovered here represents the future of athlete influence and MVP campaigning. Clark didn't just support her teammate, she demonstrated how strategic social media deployment can reshape individual recognition and championship narratives. The competitive intelligence reveals that while other channels focus on surface-level drama and injury conspiracies, the real story involves sophisticated psychological warfare and influence network activation that's reshaping MVP evaluation frameworks. This is exactly the kind of insider perspective and systematic analysis that separates the narrative analysts from casual basketball consumption. We're not just watching games, we're decoding the strategic thinking and influence tactics that determine how excellence gets recognized and rewarded. Clark's MVP campaign orchestration for Mitchell represents a paradigm shift in how elite athletes build power, shape narratives, and create competitive advantages that extend far beyond individual performance metrics. The intersection of elite performance and strategic influence is reshaping professional sports in ways that most coverage completely misses. This is where basketball intelligence meets psychological warfare, and Clark is writing the playbook,